Welcome back. You're watching the RSR TV. Guyana will be celebrating their 50th independence celebration on May the 26th. Guyana gained independence on May the 26th, 1966. Up next, we have the former president and now opposition leader of the People's Progressive Party of Guyana. He was visiting New York last week and there was a town hall meeting set up and he was the main speaker. And this morning we want to bring you the video footages of that town hall meeting. Let's watch.
A lot of the programs in this budget are programs on the capital side, because if money is spent on the capital side, that is an expansion of infrastructure, etc., you will find that's productive expenditure. So, but most of those, 85% of the capital expenditure are rollover from projects that we left. So the paving of the West Coast Road, the bypass road, we left financing for that. The 4-lane road on the East Coast, $15 billion from the Norwegian Fund for ICT and for the Amerindian development. 2 new large water treatment plants. This sort of expenditure that are rollover projects from the PPP. Part of it capital. But the biggest growth in the budget, $40 billion, is spent on the recurrent side. And I'm telling you this because I want you to get a feel for where our money is going. So where would the $40 billion go? We have now about close to $3 billion for the People's Militia and the Army. So they're going to bring back the People's Militia. Secondly, they budgeted not $300 million, but $1 billion to celebrate national event this year. $1 billion. $1.2 billion for dietary. That is government eating. Dietary in the government. $800 million for increase in stationery. They'll be writing a lot more this year. This sort of thing. They've mentioned about rehabilitation, so they're rehabilitating State House because it was not good enough for the president. They're rehabilitating the Prime Minister's house. He couldn't move in yet because that's not good enough for the Prime Minister. And you know, the vehicles that we're driving for 8 years and stuff, that's not good enough. They need new vehicles for everyone. That's precisely where the money is going. So what we have, and I'm telling you this because out of the evidence based on this budget, you can discern the economic philosophy of the new government. So if you're not going to support the productive sectors to expand the economy and to create new wealth and new sources of revenue, if you're going to spend the resources we have and we left in an unproductive way, what will happen eventually? In 2 years' time, we're going to start building up huge deficits. We wouldn't be able to finance our expenditure. We will go back to a policy that they had in the 70s and the 80s, which is borrowing. And that borrowing policy led to us by 1992 taking over a country where, according to Carl Greenwich, who is a vice president, 153% of revenue went to service debt. And the debt was 7.5 times the size of our economy. So that's what we started off. So when we argued on the platform that because of the geriatric nature of this government, it's a gerontocracy, they all come from a different era and they seek their inspiration, even in economic philosophy from that era. They've gone back to the same old policy that failed in the past, economic policy, that you can spend without supporting the productive sector, and that somehow, miraculously, the country will grow. And so that will lead us once again, if they stay there long enough, to a situation where we would accumulate huge quantities of debt, and we'll have to start back rebuilding the country from that low base that we took over, that took us so many years. It took us almost 10 to 12 years to just get a handle on the debt, because we ended up paying back over $2 billion US dollars and got another 2.5 billion written off US dollars. That is why by the time we left, we had reduced the debt servicing from 153% of revenue to 4% of revenue, the lowest in the region. We took a country that was bankrupt and made it economically viable. My fear is with this policy they're practicing, they will take it back in that direction again. And so that is very, very worrying to me. But if they, so where do they? They're not stupid people. And so if they're not going to expand the base of the economy to get more revenue, where are they going to get money to run the country? And they have identified some easy targets. So look at this budget. It's the budget that has increased the most taxes in our entire history. We had about 140 taxes and licensing fees increased in this budget, ranging from 50% to 600%. So every service that where you need a permit from the government, whether it's a driver's license, or let me give you an example. People who were going around and like if they had a small vehicle and they were going around to sell, their license has moved from $12,000 to $65,000 now. If you have a dray cart, you travel with a dray cart, I think it's gone up to 20-something thousand from $4,000. So driver's license, everything. But what is even more worrisome, it is not just the increase in the licenses, that before you get your license renewed now, you have to go to the GRA and they will ask you one question. Have you paid taxes in the last 7 years? So if you have not filed income tax returns for the past 7 years, you will now be required to file those returns before you get your license renewed. So just imagine a person who lives in Paramakatoy in the interior, or say Kwakwani in Apnu Stronghold, or in Mara, or in Berbice, anywhere. They have a small shop, and they're basically just making a living, etc. They now have to prove, before they get their license renewed, they'd have to go file their income tax returns for the past 7 years, be assessed, pay taxes, and then get their license renewed. So the same, you recall under Burnham, we had to get a tax exit certificate before you left the country. This is even worse than the Burnham era, because it is what they're affecting is people's right to work. I have said that we will challenge it, because the Constitution that I signed into law made the right to work a fundamental right. And you can't put preconditions to that right, because the license that people get is the license to work. And if you're going to say they're not going to be able to get their license because they have to pay separate taxes, this is income tax, then you're infringing on that right. You can assess them for income tax returns separately, but not make it a condition for their renewal of licenses. So this will affect about 50,000 Guyanese, and many of them are small companies or small individuals, because the big companies, they get their permits easily. And so when I spoke 2 minutes after the minister read his budget speech, I said two things. It's anti-development and anti-poor. Let me give you, so that was just one measure that will affect about 50,000 poor persons who are trying to make a living in Guyana. Secondly, look at the banning of vehicles above 8 years old. They've just decided to ban that. So that was the last budget too. Now, who does this help? It helps a few of the new car dealers who give them large sums of money because they got big campaign donations. But this will affect tens of thousands of Guyanese. Immediately, the price of a car has moved up by about 33%, a used car. And guess who buys these cars, the used cars, the reconditioned cars? These are people, young people, who just maybe started working, they can't afford to buy a new car. These are small farmers, these are small people who are just emerging from poverty into the lower middle class. They're into lower middle class, they can afford, you want to drive something, they can afford a vehicle like that. Many of them will not be able to, so they did that. They then went and banned tires, used tires. So the excuse was they're causing accidents. So I said, let's look at the statistics about what causes accident. 95% of our accidents are caused by two things: speeding and drunken driving. That is what they're caused by, not tires. So I suggested, why not strengthen the Bureau of Standards to see that we bring in better quality tires? So used tires, but they banned it. Now, one of those tires would have probably cost $4,000. Now it's about $20,000. So immediately the taxi drivers have said, if we have to pay more to buy the vehicle and tires, we have to push up fares. Many poor people can't afford this. I can go on tonight and tell you about 10 other measures in the budget that would hit poor people where they're going. The new source of revenue seems to be poor people, because they've just given a waiver to DDL, one of the biggest companies we have, that will cost the Treasury $16 billion. The president loves commissions of inquiry. Everything for him is a commission of inquiry. So I asked him to do a commission of inquiry on that, to tell the nation why they would give one company at a minimum, because we don't know the true implications of the waiver as yet, but $16 billion. But we can't find $1.6 billion to keep the grant that we gave, the transportation grant that we had given to every school child. They removed that. They took it back. So they took back $1.6 billion from our children on the basis that we can't afford it. But they can give up $16 billion to one company. All these tax measures would raise $2 billion and put serious pressure on poor people, but they gave $16 billion to one company. They can't find $1.7 billion to keep Wales open, but give up $16 billion to this one company. If they keep Wales open, it will help 25,000 people who live on the West Bank, not just the 1,700 workers who are directly involved, or the 800 others who are working for the private cane farmers. So what, on the economic side, they're painting a clear picture of where we are going. That they will spend in an irresponsible fashion. They don't care about growing our economy. They will tax anyone, including poor people, for future income. And so we don't have much to look forward to.